first time I saw Lady Corvina Latch, I knew she would either destroy me or complete me. There would be no middle ground between us, only fire or ash. Rain slashed against cobblestones like silver daggers as I approached Thornwood Manor, each step pulling me deeper into a web I hadn't yet recognized. The townspeople whispered her name behind locked doors, Corvina Latch, as if speaking it aloud might summon her from whatever darkness she called home. They called her reclusive, dangerous, untouchable. They had no idea how right they were. My name is Bran, and I steal beautiful things from people who've forgotten how to appreciate beauty. Tonight's prize was rumored to be worth more than my life. A glass vial containing immortelle extract, a single drop that could stop time within a beating heart. At least that's what my employer believed. The manor rose before me like a sleeping predator, its Gothic windows glowing amber against the storm's fury. I circled to the servants' entrance, my lockpicks dancing through the mechanism with practiced ease. The door surrendered without protest. Warmth enveloped me as I slipped inside, lavender and beeswax, undercut with something sharper that made my pulse quicken and my skin tighten with awareness. I moved through the kitchen like smoke, past hanging copper pots that caught firelight like watching eyes, into corridors where grandfather clocks counted heartbeats in the darkness. Thornwood's grandeur revealed itself in whispers, velvet drapes that pooled like spilled wine, oil paintings whose subjects tracked my movement with painted eyes, silver candelabras casting dancing shadows across marble floors, polished to mirror perfection. I avoided the main staircase, choosing instead a narrow servants' passage that would lead me to her private chambers. The air grew thick as I climbed, heavy with roses and something metallic that tasted like secrets on my tongue. Every instinct screamed danger, but desire drove me forward. Not just for the vial, but for something I couldn't yet name, something that pulled at me like gravity. On the second floor, golden light spilled from beneath a door at the corridor's end. A voice drifted through the darkness, female, cultured, each word flowing like honey over heated skin, making my chest tighten with unexpected longing. And so the moth, drawn to the flame's deadly beauty, circles closer and closer, unaware that its desire will be its undoing. I pressed my eye to the keyhole. Through the brass circle, a parlor materialized in fragments, a crackling fire painting shadows on silk wallpaper, shelves lined with curiosities that seemed to watch me, and a wingback chair positioned with its back to me. All I could see was an elegant hand draped over the armrest, the fingers adorned with wine-dark nails that matched the color of dried blood. "Do you know why the moth does it?" The voice continued, and I realized she wasn't reading. She was speaking to someone I couldn't see. Some believe it's instinct, a fatal navigation error. But I think the moth understands exactly what it's doing. I think it chooses the flame, knowing full well the price. My fingers closed around the brass knob, turning it with agonizing slowness. The door opened without protest, and I slipped inside, keeping to the shadows cast by the towering bookshelves that smelled of leather and time. Lady Corvina sat with perfect posture, though I could see only her profile. Sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, a straight nose that spoke of aristocratic breeding, lips painted to match her nails. Her black hair was swept into an intricate arrangement that exposed the elegant curve of her neck, adorned with a single strand of pearls that gleamed like captured moonlight. I scanned the room for my prize. Near the fireplace, a glass case held a collection of preserved moths, their wings spread in eternal display, beautiful and dead. Beside it, a rosewood table supported a row of glass vials that caught the firelight like captured stars, each one promising secrets I couldn't imagine. I moved carefully along the wall, my eyes fixed on her motionless form. She seemed carved from marble, beautiful and untouchable as a statue in some forgotten temple. My breath came shallow, controlled, until my elbow caught a delicate teacup perched on a side table. The porcelain teetered and fell, striking the Persian carpet with a muffled thud that echoed through my bones. Lady Corvina didn't startle. She simply closed her leather-bound book with deliberate precision, each movement flowing like water. "You poor thing," she said, rising and turning toward me with a liquid grace that made my mouth go dry. "Have you gotten yourself caught?" The breath left my lungs in a rush. She was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 35, with eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her burgundy gown whispered against the floor as she moved, the color matching her lips with unsettling precision, as if she'd been painted by some mad artist obsessed with blood and shadows. I summoned my most disarming smile, the one that had gotten me out of trouble more times than I could count. "Forgive me, my lady. I'm afraid I've lost my way in the storm." Her lips curved upward, but the smile never reached those fathomless eyes. Lost? All the way into my private parlor? She moved closer, and I caught her scent. Night-blooming jasmine layered with something darker that made my thoughts turn sluggish, and my body respond in ways I hadn't expected. How unfortunate. She circled me with predatory grace, and I fought the urge to track her movement, to turn like a flower following the sun. "I know what you are," she continued, her voice a caress that seemed to touch my skin directly. "A taker of things. A collector of treasures that don't belong to you." She stopped directly before me, close enough that I could see amber flecks in her dark eyes, close enough that her breath whispered across my skin like a promise. "What have you come to steal from me, little thief?" The lie died on my lips before I could speak it. Something in her gaze demanded honesty, stripped away the pretense like acid eating through silk. A vial, one containing immortelle extract. Her eyebrows lifted fractionally, and I caught a flicker of something. Surprise? Amusement? "And what would a beautiful young man like you want with such a dangerous thing?" Beautiful. The word sent heat spiraling through my chest, pooling low in my belly like molten gold. No one had ever called me beautiful before. Handsome, perhaps. Attractive when it served their purposes. But beautiful, that was something else entirely. "I acquire things for others," I managed, my voice rougher than I'd intended. "The why isn't my concern." How practical. She studied me with the intensity of a scientist examining a rare specimen, and I felt exposed, seen in ways that made me want to both flee and step closer. "You're skilled at what you do. To have made it this far without alerting my servants or triggering my safeguards." I remained silent, uncertain whether she was praising or condemning me, afraid that speaking might break whatever spell held us suspended in that moment. Her smile transformed, becoming something wild and dangerous that made my pulse stutter. "Let's play a game," she whispered, the words hanging between us like an incantation. "If you can leave this house by sunrise, I'll give you the vial myself. No theft required." "And if I can't?" Her smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too white in the firelight. "Then you stay, and we'll discover other ways for you to be useful to me." Every survival instinct I'd honed on the streets screamed at me to run, to bolt for the door and take my chances with the storm. But something deeper, curiosity, desire, or perhaps recognition of a kindred spirit, made me nod. "I accept your terms." "Good." She extended one pale hand, and I noticed how her fingers were long and elegant, like a pianist's. "I'm Corvina, by the way. And you are?" "Bran." Her fingers were cool against mine, her touch electric in a way that made me want to never let go. "Just Bran." Her touch lingered, the thumb brushing across my knuckles in a caress that sent fire racing up my arm. How delightfully mysterious. She released my hand before I was ready, leaving my skin burning where she'd touched me. Walking to the mantel, she lifted a small silver bell and rang it once, the clear note hanging in the air like a promise. "That's to give you a sporting chance," she explained, settling back into her chair with fluid grace. "My servants will retire for the night, leaving just the two of us to play." She opened her book, though her eyes remained on me, dark and unreadable. "Run along now. Hide. Seek your escape. I'll find you when I'm ready." I backed toward the door, unwilling to turn away from her, afraid she might vanish if I broke eye contact. Only at the threshold did I pivot and run, my footsteps echoing through corridors that seemed to stretch longer than before, as if the house itself were breathing, expanding with each beat of my racing heart. The manor had transformed in my absence. Hallways extended into impossible distances. Doors appeared where none had existed moments before, and shadows moved with existences of their own, reaching for me with finger-like tendrils. I tried the main entrance, locked tight as a tomb. Every window refused to budge, the glass cold and unyielding beneath my palms. Even the servants' door through which I'd entered had acquired an elaborate mechanism I hadn't noticed before, its brass fittings gleaming like malevolent eyes. This wasn't merely hide and seek. This was a test of will, of endurance. And Corvina held every advantage in a game whose rules I didn't understand. I climbed to the 3rd floor, where dust sheets draped over forgotten furniture, like ghosts of better times. I selected a study at the corridor's end, positioning myself in a mahogany wardrobe that offered a view of the front gardens through tall windows. From here, I could observe her movements and plan accordingly, assuming she followed any conventional logic. Hours crawled past. Thunder rolled across distant hills while I remained motionless, controlling my breathing as I'd learned in my early days on the streets, when survival meant becoming invisible. Patience was a thief's greatest weapon. That, and the ability to read people, to understand what they wanted before they knew it themselves. A floorboard creaked outside, the sound sharp as breaking bone in the silence. The study door opened slowly, revealing an empty darkness that seemed to pulse with its own life. "Bran!" Corvina's voice drifted through the air like smoke, though she remained invisible. "Are you hiding among the ghosts? They're terrible conversationalists, I'm afraid, always dwelling on the past." I pressed deeper into the wardrobe's shadows, the wood creaking softly around me, holding my breath until my lungs burned. Her laughter rippled through the darkness, musical and unsettling, like wind chimes made of bone. "No matter, I'll find you eventually. We have all night, and I do so enjoy a good hunt." The door closed, her footsteps receding down the corridor. Then her voice returned, impossibly close, as if she stood directly beside me. "You smell like cinnamon and fear, little thief. Such an intoxicating combination." I burst from the wardrobe and rushed the door, colliding with empty air that tasted of jasmine and promises. The corridor stretched vacant before me, moonlight painting dust motes in my wake, like fairy dust scattered by invisible hands. I ran through winding passages, past portraits whose eyes tracked my desperate flight with painted gazes that felt too real, too knowing. The house breathed around me, shifting, conspiring with its mistress to confound my escape, the walls seeming to close in with each desperate stride. In a grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers cast fractured rainbows across polished floors that reflected my image into infinity. I paused against a marble column, gasping, sweat cooling on my skin in the vast space. "Tired already?" Corvina's voice echoed from above, rich with amusement. "The night is still young, and we've barely begun to know one another." I looked up to find her perched on the balcony railing like an exotic bird, her gown cascading around her in burgundy waves. The sight stole what little breath I had left. She was impossibly beautiful, impossibly graceful, impossibly there when she should have been searching the third floor. "How are you finding me?" I demanded. She smiled, closing an upside-down book with deliberate care. "This is my domain, darling. Every shadow reports to me. Every draft carries your scent." She leaned forward, and I thought she might fall, my body tensing instinctively to catch her. "Besides, your emotions are quite loud. Desire has a particular scent, like lightning before it strikes." "I'm not afraid of you." She pushed off from the railing, and my heart lurched. But instead of falling, she descended with impossible grace, her gown billowing like wings as she floated down to land before me with barely a whisper of sound. "Perhaps you should be..." I stumbled backward, my mind reeling with the impossibility of what I'd witnessed. "What are you?" "I told you." Her smile turned predatory, revealing those two sharp teeth. "An herbalist, a healer." She stepped closer, and I felt heat radiating from her skin like fever. "A collector of rare and beautiful things." I fled again, running until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give out, until I found myself in a conservatory filled with impossible plants. Flowers pulsed with inner light like captured stars. Vines writhed at my approach with serpentine grace, and at the center grew a tree whose bark seemed to beat like a living heart, its rhythm matching my own racing pulse. The air was thick with perfume so sweet it made my head spin, made my thoughts fuzzy and unfocused. I pressed against the glass wall, struggling to think clearly as the scent invaded my senses. Hours had passed. They must have. Yet sunrise felt eternally distant, as if time itself had stopped to watch our deadly dance. I needed a new strategy. If doors and windows were useless, perhaps there were other exits, forgotten passages, servant ways that predated whatever supernatural influence she wielded over this place. The kitchen seemed my best option. I slipped from the conservatory and made my way through increasingly familiar corridors, searching for practical solutions to an impossible situation, attempting to apply logic to a world that seemed to have abandoned it entirely. The kitchen was cavernous, dominated by a massive hearth that could have roasted an entire ox, and a scarred wooden table that spoke of generations of meals prepared in this space. Copper pots hung from beams like burnished mirrors, and dried herbs dangled like ancient charms, filling the air with the scent of thyme and rosemary and things I couldn't name. I searched methodically, tapping walls for hollow spaces, examining the flagstone floor for loose stones, exploring the wine cellar accessed through a heavy door beside the hearth. Nothing. Every secret I uncovered led to more stone, more darkness, more dead ends. As I climbed the cellar stairs, my legs heavy with exhaustion, a sound froze my blood, the soft scrape of a chair being moved against stone. Through the crack in the door, I saw her. Corvina sat at the kitchen table, cradling a steaming cup between her elegant hands, looking directly at my hiding place with those dark, knowing eyes. "Join me," she called, her voice soft as silk and twice as dangerous. "You must be thirsty after all that running." Caught again. I pushed the door open and stepped into the flickering firelight, shadows dancing across my skin like living things. "Tea?" She gestured to an empty chair across from her, steam rising from a second cup I hadn't noticed before. "No." I remained standing, though exhaustion weighed on my shoulders like a physical burden, making every muscle ache with fatigue. Her lips curved in what might have been disappointment. "Suit yourself." She sipped delicately, studying me over the rim with eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul. "You're more persistent than most. They usually beg for mercy by now. I'm not most people." "No," she agreed, setting down her cup with porcelain precision. "You're not. That's why I'm enjoying this so much." Her gaze traveled over me slowly, appraisingly, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Most thieves who find their way to my door are driven by simple greed. But you... She tilted her head, studying me like a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. You're searching for something else entirely, aren't you? The hall clock struck 3, its deep chimes reverberating through my bones like a funeral bell. 3 hours until sunrise, I noted, attempting to project confidence I didn't feel. Plenty of time. Corvina smiled, rising to pull back the window curtain with one graceful motion. Outside, the sky remained dark as pitch, but the rain had stopped. Stars glittered in impossible configurations, and the moon hung in a different phase than when I'd arrived, as if time itself had become negotiable. What's happening? I moved to the window, disoriented by the wrongness of it all. How long have I been here? Time enough, she answered cryptically, her reflection ghost-like in the dark glass beside mine. Come. You've earned a respite from our chase. Against every survival instinct screaming in my head, I followed her through a door I hadn't noticed before, down a corridor lined with botanical illustrations that seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at them, up a spiral staircase that wound into darkness like the inside of a shell. We emerged in a tower room with windows on all sides, offering panoramic views of the estate that stretched further than seemed possible. The space was filled with curious instruments, telescopes pointed at impossible stars, astrolabes marking time that didn't exist, prisms that cast rainbow patterns across walls covered in star charts and astronomical calculations. My observatory, Corvina explained, adjusting a telescope with practiced ease, her movements precise and sure. From here, I watched the stars, the weather, the village below. She paused, glancing at me with something that might have been vulnerability flickering in her dark eyes. The patterns that govern all our lives. And potential prey, I added, unable to keep the edge from my voice. She glanced back, amusement dancing in her eyes like firelight. Occasionally, her smile softened, becoming something almost human, though I preferred to think of them as guests. I approached the eastern window, relief flooding through me at the faint lightening of the sky, dawn's first promise painting the horizon with hints of gold and rose. You're running out of time, she observed, moving to stand beside me. So close I sensed the warmth radiating from her skin, smelled that intoxicating scent of jasmine and mystery. But I'll give you a hint, as reward for your tenacity and because... She paused, seeming to weigh her words. Because you've surprised me. She turned to face me, suddenly serious, all trace of the predatory hunter gone. The way out is through the heart of the house. A riddle? Instructions. Her hand brushed mine, a touch so brief it might have been imagination, but the electric shock that ran up my arm was very real. Thornwood has a heart, Bran. Find it, and you'll find your freedom. Before I could respond, she was gone, dissolved into shadows as if she'd never existed, leaving only the lingering scent of jasmine and the memory of her touch burning on my skin. I stood alone in the observatory, her words echoing in my mind like an incantation. The heart of the house, not a location. I'd explored nearly every room, touched nearly every surface. Something else. The source of whatever power allowed her to move like smoke, to bend reality to her will, to make time itself negotiable. Descending the spiral staircase, I noticed what I'd missed in my eagerness to follow her. The portraits lining the walls featured the same woman across different eras. Elizabethan ruffs giving way to Georgian silks, Victorian bustles, Edwardian lace. In every painting, regardless of the period, she wore the same face, the same dark eyes, the same secret smile. And in every single portrait, regardless of fashion or era, she wore a silver locket shaped like a moth, its wings spread as if frozen in eternal flight. Corvina's earlier words returned to me with new meaning. The moth, drawn to the flame's deadly beauty, circles closer and closer, unaware that its desire will be its undoing. The locket, the heart of the house, the source of her power, the key to whatever spell held this place in thrall. And if the portraits were accurate, Lady Corvina Latch was far, far older than she appeared. Understanding crystallized like ice in my veins. I needed to find her again, but this time, I would be the hunter. I returned to her parlor, where our deadly game had begun. The fire still burned as if fed by invisible hands. The moth collection stood untouched in its glass prison, but the room felt empty in a way that had nothing to do with physical presence. "Lady Corvina," I called, my voice steady despite the racing of my heart. "I think I've solved your riddle." Silence answered me, thick and expectant. I moved deeper into the room, scanning shadows that seemed to shift and breathe. "The heart of the house isn't a place," I continued, projecting confidence into the seemingly empty space. "It's an object. Your locket. The silver moth you wear in every portrait spanning centuries." Soft laughter came from behind me, rich and warm and somehow sad. I turned to find her seated in the wing-back chair, though I'd sworn it was empty moments before. "Very good," she said, her fingers rising unconsciously to touch the locket at her throat. The gesture was protective, almost vulnerable. "What do you intend to do with this knowledge?" I approached slowly, maintaining eye contact, reading her body language the way I'd learned to read marks on the street. "You said the way out is through the heart. I assume that means I need the locket. And how do you propose to take it from me?" Her voice was steady, but I caught the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers curled protectively around the silver moth. Despite her delicate appearance, power radiated from her like heat from flame. Any attempt to simply grab the locket would end badly. For me. "I don't want to take it," I said carefully, taking another step closer. "I want you to give it to me." She laughed, but the sound held no humor now. "And why would I do that?" "Because you're lonely," I replied, taking the biggest risk of my life. "That's why you play these games, isn't it? Eternity gets tedious when you're the only player." Her smile faltered, and for a moment, I saw through the mask to the woman beneath. Ancient, beautiful, and utterly alone. "The portraits tell your story," I pressed on, moving closer still. "Centuries of watching the world change while you remain constant. How many games have you played? How many thieves have you caught?" I gestured toward the moth collection, my voice gentling. "What happens to them afterward?" Corvina rose in one fluid motion, but there was tension in her movements now, cracks in her perfect composure. "Careful, little thief. Curiosity killed the cat." "But satisfaction brought it back," I countered, close enough now to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, close enough to feel her breath whisper across my skin. "And I suspect you're as curious about me as I am about you." We faced one another across a space that felt charged with electricity, with possibility, with the weight of words unspoken. Outside, pink and gold streaked the horizon like watercolors bleeding across wet paper. "You're different from the others," she said finally, her voice softer than I'd heard it all night. "Most offer me riches, secrets, their souls in exchange for freedom. I have nothing to offer but myself," I admitted, the truth of it burning in my chest. "And I suspect that's exactly what interests you." Her laugh was different now, almost vulnerable, like armor cracking to reveal the person beneath. "You're more perceptive than most who find their way to my door." She unclasped the locket with trembling fingers and held it up, silver catching firelight like captured stars. "Would you like to know its secret?" I nodded, mesmerized by the way light played across her features, by the sudden humanity in her ancient eyes. "It contains no magic," she said, opening the locket to reveal emptiness where I'd expected to find some mystical artifact. "The heart of the house is a metaphor, darling. The true power lies in belief, in what others think I'm capable of." She closed the distance between us, pressing the locket into my palm and folding my fingers around it with both her hands. Her touch sent fire through my veins, made my heart stutter with something far more dangerous than fear. "The doors have been unlocked since midnight, Bran. You could have left any time." I stared at her, disbelieving, the silver warm against my palm. "That's impossible. I tried every exit." "Did you? Or did you assume they were locked because that's what the game demanded?" Her hand still covered mine, and I felt the slight tremor in her fingers. Perception shapes reality. Most cages are of our own making. Dawn light filtered through the curtains, painting the room gold and rose, making her skin glow like porcelain kissed by sunlight. I glanced toward the door, then back at Corvina. Beautiful, dangerous, impossibly alone, and suddenly, heartbreakingly fragile. "Go," she whispered, but her voice held no conviction, and her hands tightened almost imperceptibly around mine. "You've earned your freedom." I opened my palm, expecting the locket. Instead, a glass vial lay against my skin, filled with liquid that captured and refracted the morning light like liquid starfire. "The immortelle extract," I breathed. "A myth," she confirmed, her voice barely a whisper. "But myths have their own power, don't they?" I pocketed the vial, still struggling to understand, still reeling from the night's revelations. "Who are you, really?" Corvina moved to the window, drawing back curtains to let sunrise flood the room, and for a moment she looked younger, more vulnerable, like a woman instead of a force of nature. "I am exactly what they say. Herbalist, healer, collector of beautiful things." She turned back to me, and vulnerability flickered across her features like candlelight. "And occasionally, when fortune smiles, a keeper of interesting souls." I walked to the parlor door, my hand on the brass knob that had started this whole impossible night. The metal was warm beneath my palm, ordinary, real. Will I remember this, or will it fade like a dream? "That," she said, her voice carrying across the golden space between us, "depends entirely on whether you choose to return." I stood at the front entrance of Thornwood Manor as the sun painted the world in shades of possibility. The night's rain had left everything sparkling, newborn, as if the earth itself had been washed clean. Corvina appeared behind me like a whisper made flesh, holding a velvet pouch that gleamed in the morning light. "You almost made it on your own," she said, pressing the pouch into my hands with fingers that lingered against mine. "But almost is how the clever fall." I didn't flinch at her approach this time. Something had shifted between us during our nocturnal dance, some understanding that transcended predator and prey, hunter and hunted. We were something else now, something unnamed but real. "What now?" I asked, my voice rough with exhaustion and something deeper. She considered me with those fathomless dark eyes, and I saw something there I hadn't expected. Hope, perhaps, or recognition, or the first stirring of something that might, given time, become love. "Now," she said, stepping closer until I felt her warmth, until her jasmine scent wrapped around me like a promise. "You choose. You can leave. Return to your life of taking beautiful things from people who've forgotten their value." Her hand rose to touch my cheek, the contact electric and gentle and heartbreaking all at once. Or, her lips curved in a smile that held a danger that spoke to me. "Or you can stay. Learn what it means to be truly seen, truly known. Help me remember what it feels like to not be alone." The pouch in my hands warmed. Through its velvet exterior, I felt the shape of the vial, My original prize, my ticket back to the ordinary world where magic was myth, and lonely immortals existed only in stories. But as I looked at Corvina, silhouetted against the rising sun with hope blooming in her ancient eyes, I realized the real treasure had never been immortelle extract. It was this moment, this choice, this woman who moved through shadows and spoke in riddles, who'd played a game with me and somehow lost her heart in the process. I pocketed the pouch and took a step toward her, watching her face transform with something like wonder. "I choose the flame," I said, reaching up to cup her face in my hands, watching her eyes flutter closed at the touch. Her smile transformed her entire face, erasing centuries of loneliness in a single moment. "You beautiful, foolish man," she whispered, and then her lips were on mine, soft and warm, and tasting of jasmine and promises and forever. When we broke apart, the sun had fully risen, painting Thornwood Manor in shades of gold and possibility. I looked at the woman in my arms, no longer the predatory creature who'd hunted me through shadowed halls, but simply Corvina, beautiful and real and mine. "What happens now?" I asked, threading my fingers through her dark hair. "Now," she said, her eyes bright with something I chose to call love, "we have all the time in the world to figure it out. After all, the moth always returns to the flame. And sometimes, if it's very lucky, it finds that the flame has been waiting for it all along."